legislative filibuster in the Senate is standing in the way of getting you and the rest of the country a $15 an hour federal minimum wage, something that has not been updated in this country since 2009. The current federal minimum wage still stands at $7.25, which isn't even a wage, a living wage, obviously, it's a starvation wage. Now, when it comes to the coronavirus relief checks, when it comes to any legislation moving forward, Democrats will not be able to accomplish it unless they nuke what's referred to as the legislative filibuster. And the person standing in the way right now of doing that is Democratic Senator Joe Manchin, who had a temper tantrum recently when he was asked if he would vote to end the filibuster, given how difficult it is to pass a $15 an hour minimum wage. Manchin asked if there's a point where he would change his mind on the filibuster, turns around to yell, "Never. Jesus Christ, what don't you understand about never?" So this man is in favor of this arbitrary obstructionist rule in Congress right now, in the Senate specifically, that stands in the way of accomplishing anything. It essentially makes Democrats worthless unless they're able to get 60 votes to pass any piece of legislation, given the fact that the Senate is dealing with a 50-50 split right now. It is impossible to get the 60 votes necessary to pass important policies like a $15 an hour minimum wage, something we've been talking about for weeks now. I can't stand Manchin, and I wish that progressive Democrats were actually a lot more aggressive in showing up to his state, Francesca, and campaigning against him. And that includes Sinema, by the way, Kyrsten Sinema, who's a senator from the state of Arizona as well. Both of them have been absolutely horrendous when it comes to this issue. But I wanted to get your thoughts on it.
I mean, I just want to say I do think there are growing grassroots movements in both Arizona and West Virginia that are attempting to break this stranglehold of these Democrats who might as well be playing for the other team. I mean, this is the thing with Manchin. You gotta, like, I'm trying to game it out for him. Like, what is the benefit of blocking your own party from being able to deliver on anything? Like, you don't get to go home and say, see, I stopped my own party from passing, a $15 minimum wage or any kind of relief or voting rights. Like, you don't have, what's the 7D chess move here? I mean, maybe you understand it better than I do, Anna. Maybe it's like he's gonna switch parties, made you look like what? Why are we stymieing your own effing party?
Manchin, because of the fact that Democrats have such a toxic reputation among voters in West Virginia, Manchin has really made an effort to differentiate himself from the rest of the Democrats in Congress. Now that's understandable, but I think that when it comes to specific issues and you take the labels out of it, something like a $15 an hour minimum wage, forget the legislators, focus on the people and what voters want. The vast majority of voters, Democrats and Republicans combined, want a $15 an hour minimum wage. And you're absolutely right, Francesca. One of the things that's given me a little bit of hope is seeing grassroots movements in West Virginia, people who are part of the Fight for 15, holding Manchin accountable for his refusal to join the fight to increase the federal minimum wage to a living wage. Now, he said that he would increase it to $11 an hour, but the people of West Virginia not only want $15 an hour, they deserve $15 an hour. And so for Manchin to stand in the way of that is ridiculous, and he can't use the same BS branding excuse for why he's doing it. I get it. I get that he needs to be more of a so-called centrist or moderate Democrat to appeal to voters in his state that can't stand the Democratic Party. But at the end of the day, when we talk about this issue by issue, the proposals that were in the original Biden coronavirus relief package, which included the minimum wage, the direct checks to Americans and all that, it's popular with his voters. Yeah, he's the one who's standing in the way of it right now. And the fact that he will not nuke the filibuster is absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, you're basically resigning yourself to getting nothing done. And that's the thing. I think this is the thing though that's really important, even though we are in this deadlocked 50-50 Senate with Kamala as the tie-breaking vote. It is so hyper partisan. But I feel like, and maybe you feel some of this, I want to get to a point where these issues aren't partisan. And like you're saying, the polling shows is that they're not. Everyone wants to be able to put food on the table, huh? funny how that's like, neither a Democrat or Republican thing. In fact, it's, the elite and wealthy versus everybody else. And that is something just like healthcare and the ways that Republican senators got it when they were trying to overturn the ACA from their voters who were Republican. Like, these are popular issues. Manchin would have something to show to his constituents that he can depoliticize. And especially if we change the language around it by saying, look, this is not about Democrat, this is not about blue and red or whatever. This is actually about human rights and the rights of all Americans.
Absolutely. And look, there are currently 10 million Americans right now who are still jobless as a result of the coronavirus pandemic, meaning they were laid off through no fault of their own. We have a situation in which people have avoided eviction in most cases because of the eviction moratorium. But once that is lifted, once forbearance for mortgages is also lifted, we're talking about people who have to pay back either their lender or their landlord quite a bit of money, in some cases tens of thousands of dollars that they simply don't have. And I mean, the legislation being proposed right now doesn't even really deal with that. So the $1.9 trillion coronavirus relief bill is okay, but it's still insufficient when it comes to providing the relief that Americans desperately need. And then you have Joe Manchin arguing, no, it's a little too much. It's a little too much. I would actually like it to be a little more targeted. So as Jake Johnson reports in Common Dreams, the $1.9 trillion relief measure approved by the House of Representatives late last week proposes extending emergency unemployment insurance programs through the end of August with a weekly federal supplement of $400 up from the current $300 per week boost that's set to begin expiring on March 14th. Now, in regard to that, okay, this is what Manchin had to say. Manchin said that he'd prefer to see a $300 benefit rather than a $400 benefit in response to criticism that some laid off workers could end up making more money on unemployment than they would on the job. Okay, so let's hold up for a second. So because companies are unwilling to increase their pay from a starvation wage to something that could, I don't know, compete with the federal government, we're gonna actually go over to the federal government and tell them, no, let's actually lower the amount of relief we're gonna give to people who are unemployed right now through no fault of their own, because we want to encourage them to go back to the jobs that don't currently exist. That's what he's saying.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and this I think is like, this is a lot of the ideology of senators and governors around this country, which is this bizarre race to the bottom to make sure that corporations get the red carpet for them, and that their actual constituents, that their citizens, their residents get nothing. They get crumbs. And you should be happy for those crumbs, because the cost of living is low here. Like what? What are we talking about? I mean, this is it's a mindset of fear. It's a mindset of disrespect, not just for working people, but for all people. And it's saying, yeah, no, my constituents are disposable and expendable. And we don't want to pay them for anymore. I mean, imagine like, they all just subscribe to this like neoliberal economic BS theory that's been debunked over and over and over. And oh my God, it's the year 2021. Don't we understand that when you actually help working people, that then trickles up into your blessed economy?
Yeah, I mean, but Francesca, when the Federal Reserve is printing money for the failing corporations and then they can go ahead and buy shares of their own stocks and artificially inflate stock values or share values, why would they need to have a healthy middle class that's compensated appropriately and can actually help to contribute to the economy? They don't need that. The Federal Reserve comes in and they play interference, run interference, and ensure that they lift up the companies that need the capital. Everyone else can go F themselves. That's essentially what we have in this current system right now. And I do also want to just quickly mention that Manchin is calling for more means testing, a more targeted approach when it comes to the $1,400 coronavirus relief checks. He says, we're just looking for a targeted bill. We want it to be very targeted, helping the people that need help the most. And how would that targeting happen? Well, it would lower the threshold for the people who would actually qualify for those $1,400 coronavirus relief checks. So if you make above $50,000 as opposed to $75,000, you will likely see the amount of that money taper off to the point where you get absolutely nothing for some earners. But the point here is, let's of course cut the amount of spending that would provide relief to people who have really been hurting during this coronavirus economic collapse. And don't look at what's happening with the GDP. Don't look at what's happening with massive corporations. They've done really well. They're thriving in the middle of this pandemic, whereas workers are the ones who have been suffering.
I just think that whole mindset, and look, people in the Biden administration, hello Pete Buttigieg, have the same ideology, which has not borne out. Like, there's no evidence that shows that if you give a stimulus to people making $75,000, that's suddenly, that's gonna be terrible for the economy. Actually, alternatively, for all these folks, everyone loves to talk about business owners. Well, that 75 to 150,000 for a couple, that sounds around like a business owner, right? Like a small business owner, someone trying to make it work. That stimulus would be huge for them. Those folks might employ people. And I'm not talking about Jared Kushner, who employed 3 people or whomever, right? Like this is all a tactic. And I think we have to remember that when you means test these kinds of stimulus and these kinds of bailouts, you're actually creating far more friction and deliberately among people who are in different brackets. Rather than putting us all in the same group, creating solidarity, you're pitting people against one another, and you're making sort of middle class. Let's remember, like, a lot of Trumpers are super middle. They're like middle to upper middle class boat dads who are very comfortable, and they hate the poor. So this is all like, hey, how come I'm not getting what that person's getting? I'm not saying we placate them, but I'm saying that when these benefits are more available to all, there is more buy-in, and it actually does help the entire economy, and not just a trickle down or just when someone is literally at death's door.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Universal programs tend to poll better because they apply to everyone. So once you start dividing up people and pitting people against one another, that's when, you're right, the buy-in starts to fade away. So we'll keep an eye on Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema and keep updating you guys on what's happening with this coronavirus relief bill.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks. Really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.